be here with all of you. We've got actually a bunch of celebrities in the audience. There are winemakers, there are important luminaries from the CIA and from Copia, which you may or may not know, but it was started by Julia Child, a culinary icon of America, who though brought the idea of food TV and getting back into the kitchen to the United States, but also worked with Robert Mondavi. And it was really Robert and Margaret Mondavi who created this beautiful institution that you can visit. And when you're coming to Napa Valley, we'd love to have you join us for Quench at Copia. This is our live stream celebrating America 250. Yes. And I dressed the part, of course, and we dressed the set a little bit. But yesterday was, as many of you hopefully remember, it was Bastille Day, and so we got to give a little love to our French friends. Without we would not have a country, and I think most of us who've studied a little bit of history know that our revolution was a collaboration with the French. Our love of wine and food is very much a collaboration with the French, and our love of what we stand for and what the French stand for, liberty, is very much alive and well. So we're super excited to be celebrating that. My theme is Route Sipty-Sip. We kind of have a cute little graphic, I think, for that. Let's check that out. And I happen to be skateboarding through the Kronos Vineyard in St. Helena. But look what AI can do for us, right? But today we're actually going further afield, and that's why I called it Route Sipty-Sip, because we're expanding our tasting horizons and our focus on iconic American wines that are not in that classical Chardonnay and Cabernet vein that we've been talking about quite a lot lately, but nevertheless represent both the up-and-comers as well as icons that maybe don't get the same spotlight. And so we're going to have some fun with that. I am going to do a little audience poll now because we have a Finger Lakes New York Riesling, we have a Virginia Viognier, and then we have an Oregon Pinot Noir, and we have a Texas Tempranillo, and we have a Washington Cabernet Sauvignon, and of course a California Zinfandel. So of all those states that I mentioned, yell it out in the audience. Which states, if any, are actually traversed by the real Route 66? Which, does anybody know which states that we're tasting through are touched by that? Texas, yes. And California, very, very good. Yes, it goes from Chicago all the way to basically Anaheim, or essentially, Disneyland. And this all started in the 1920s to kind of connect the back roads of America and really got us on our way. So we have a couple of wines on the actual Route 66, but let's jump right in. And you're wondering why I have an empty guest seat here. It's called California traffic. It's called specifically Bay Bridge Route 80 traffic. So we do have a fantastic award-winning sommelier coming, Tonya Pitts. She'll jump into the scene when she gets here. That's what live TV is about. We've got the Finger Lakes Riesling, the Herman J. Beamer, the HJW Vineyard Riesling. And go ahead and start nosing that wine. And then I'd love for you to compare it. Maybe not necessarily taste yet, but go ahead and smell and compare wines 1 and 2, because wine 2 is a Viognier. And when we've got a Riesling, that's the grape variety, classically associated with, for a lot of people, Germany or the Alsace region of France or Austria. Those are the classic places. And they all have what in common? What does Riesling really need to succeed? Very often a cool climate. So that brings us to the Finger Lakes. This is actually Seneca Lake, and you see the vines are right on the water. Now, the reason they're called the Finger Lakes is that when you look at the map, you see this, what looks like a hand facing down. The Native Americans, the First Nations, thought that it was really the sort of the hands of the gods that had scraped or carved out those lakes, but they're like 2 million years ago during glacial action, they were carved out, and they're unbelievably deep lakes, hundreds and hundreds of feet deep. So you might think of maybe the Finger Lakes of upstate New York as being even too cold for Riesling, but what those lakes do is they hold the summer's heat at the end of the growing season to expand it and lengthen it so the grapes get ripe, And in the springtime, they hold the winter cold to keep the grapes from budding out before frost risk is over. But when you smell the Riesling versus the Viognier, what should we expect from these grape varieties? Beautiful aromatics, right? What we get on the Riesling is kind of a nice starfruit, floral, honeysuckle quality, versus when you go to the Viognier, it's a little bit sort of more tropical blossoms like jasmine and things like that. Herman J. Weimer, we chose this because they are truly an iconic producer of Finger Lakes Riesling. And we have a fantastic pairing plate that is inspired by America 250. We have a brisket slider. So barbecue. Now, let's just get this straight, everybody. Barbecue is not the thing you do on the grill. That's grilling. Barbecue is a recipe. It is a way of cooking meat. Okay, now it sounds like I'm being bossy, and I am. So how many people here in Napa, if you come to Napa to visit, got to go to State Line Road barbecue? Got a couple of hands and like lots of hands. Okay, everyone's like, okay, I might be going by there after we're done. But fantastic barbecue there, all the different styles. But Chef Derek is originally from Kansas City, where State Line Road is kind of the strip for all the great classic Kansas City barbecue joints. He has the pedigree of the Thomas Keller Restaurant Group and Bouchon Restaurant, but then he decided, hey, I'm going to open my dream of a barbecue place. So yes, we drink great California wines with barbecue here in Napa, but so you've got that. We've got a red rice andouille, special kind of low country style rice dish. We've got a country ham, Virginia country ham slider on a biscuit because we're tasting Virginia wine. Lots more to come on that. And we, of course, have mac and cheese, and that's got its own American story. And then we have, as we always do, popcorn, because popcorn and wine, well, you've got high fiber and you've got antioxidants. It's a doctor's note on a plate. When we talk about Riesling, we talk a lot about food affinity, and there's a really good reason for that. Riesling, I always say it's the Riesling for living, other than your family. It's the sommeliers love it. Sommeliers geek out over Riesling because why? What is it about Riesling that they love? Acid. Exactly. The acidity is like that spark plug of flavor enhancement for everything else that's on the plate. So if you've got fatty food, if you've got salty food, cuts right through. Think about all the condiments in your cabinet or in your refrigerator. At least half of them are acid, otherwise they're salt. And that's really what you're doing with it. You're not looking to make things sour. You're looking to unlock flavor and make your mouth water, because when your mouth waters, food tastes better. So what do we think of this wine?
Crisp and clean.
Did you say crisp and
Clean.
crisp and clean? And then it also, once you get it on the palate, it has this nice little bit of weight that you didn't expect. And it's also completely dry. Now, I want to talk a little bit for a second about what they're doing specifically at Herman Weimer, because it's a challenge to do viticulture in the Finger Lakes. It's cold. And so they have to actually hill up the vines during the winter growing season, meaning build up the dirt around them to kind of create insulation so they don't freeze. But they also have, typical East Coast humidity that sometimes gives them disease pressure, things like mildews that you might find on your tomato plants. You're gonna find it on the vines in those parts of the world. So Herman J. Weimer is doing something called biodynamic viticulture. And how many people have heard of biodynamic viticulture? And we sometimes hear a lot about it, and you hear that it has sort of relation to the phases of the moon and the cosmic movements. But the fact of the matter is that it's primarily no chemical inputs, and then treating the whole farm as an ecosystem. So they might have animals on the farm that are doing some of the grazing, and these are the all-you-can-eat laborers that mow the vines at Herman J. Weimer. But you also see the Demeter, and the Demeter is the agency that certifies biodynamic. So when they go biodynamic, it's a big commitment, and a third party certifies in the same way that USDA or California Certified will do organic certification, so that they are doing it, though, not to put on a label and try to impress us. They're doing it because of two things. So we'll take a little look at the owner, Oscar Bink, explaining why biodynamics.
So, if you look at the challenges, disease pressures and cold winters, and biodynamic itself is actually a pretty proactive way to build up resilience in the vine, using more natural product to actually build up a healthier plant that prepare itself for the challenges. So with biodynamics, quality is actually a driving force. We've seen the healthier vines are also giving healthier must and healthier juice. So the fermentation are healthier, faster, and better. The effort derives from the quality.
The idea of it isn't just about inputs, it's about quality. And just like all of us, we know that if we get more sleep, eat better, get more exercise, we're physically more resilient, we're going to probably have greater longevity and greater productivity. We as people, vines are just the same, right? Another thing that sommeliers love about Riesling is that it handles spice really nicely. And I don't mean just heat spice, but I mean any kind of exotic spice. And this has a little bit of those sort of, kind of in the realm of Cajun spices. It's got the andouille sausage. So, what do you think of that pairing? Yeah, pretty good. Yeah, we got a thumbs up in the back. Everybody else is chewing, and that's the other thing too. I know we got two thumbs up back there. People always say like, "Well, what should I do? How do I make the most of it?" And I swear by this technique. All right, I've been really bossy so far, but this is a really important one. It will change your life. I will give you my social security number so you can add me to your will because you're going to want to. When you eat the bite, then chase it with the wine. And that's how you're really going to get the major magic of it, right? The other way around, you don't get quite the same thing because it's like the wine just washes it down, but then it also the acid explodes everything else that's there. We did a wine game show. I'll tell you more about that in a little bit, but we did Old World versus New World, and all the tasters in the wine game show, they judged that this wine was a classic German top of the line Riesling because it was so typical and classic. So absolutely delicious. We are going to go on to wine number 2. I had the opportunity to visit this winery, Veritas, as part of filming for my documentary series, The Swirled Cup. It really celebrates the explosion of the global wine culture and the expansion of it following the 1976 Paris tasting, and food and cultural and restaurant identity and connection right along with it. I remember when I started in the restaurant industry, there was no such thing as wine by the glass beyond house white and house red. And now we just don't hardly know what to think if even like the airport lounge has fewer than 5 of each color. Virginia is, of course, in a lot of ways a heart center of American wine because of Thomas Jefferson, who, as you probably know, when he was the ambassador to France, he became so enamored of the wine and culinary culture there, and then brought their grapes back, had a lot of failed attempts to get them to grow in Virginia because of the climate, but also something called phylloxera. And phylloxera is a microscopic root louse that the roots of European vines were not immune to. And so phylloxera killed them. And they tried again and again, couldn't figure out what it was. And then actually a Texan from Denison, Texas, where I lived when I was little, figured out, hey, there's these vines down in the hill country that seem to be resistant to this. And now most of the vines across the globe that are European vines are planted on Texas origin rootstock. So that's how Virginia today has become quite a place for great vinifera vines, European style. So we've got the Viognier from Veritas. And how many people have had Virginia wines before? Yeah, and the interesting thing and the fun thing is that if Thomas Jefferson were around now, he would be so stoked because there are, first of all, the European style wines that he loved, specifically Bordeaux style, so Cabernet and Merlot based, that are doing really well there. In fact, so much so that one of their top estates was recently purchased by the family that owns Chateau Montrose, one of the most famous Bordeaux's. And when I went there to film, they said, well, we share an ocean with Bordeaux. And it's true. But they both had that Atlantic coastal influence. and they related more to the style of Cabernet that they could produce in Virginia than the Napa style. But this is Viognier, which really became a signature of Virginia wines early in the game. At Windows on the World, we actually had one of their early leading producers called Horton on the list. But this is Veritas, and it's unbelievably beautiful property. Before I jump into that, though, I forgot to show you the label of the Herman J. Weimer. We mentioned that it was biodynamically farmed, entirely hands-off, really clean stainless steel tank fermentation. Indigenous yeast, that simply means the yeast that comes in on the grape skins. And that is really part of the environment and therefore the expression of the wine. There are lots of ways to do it, but winemakers that use the indigenous yeast think that's really part of the expression of the vineyard itself because it comes off the vineyard. So let's take a look at the Wine 2 label. And this is the Veritas Viognier appellation within Virginia. 100% Viognier grapes, mostly stainless with a little bit of neutral oak, and then aging on the lees, which is the solids that settle, for a few months to give it roundness and creaminess in the palate. So go ahead and taste it if you haven't already. How many people have had Viognier before? Got quite a few who've had it before. How does this compare? I mean, would you recognize it as Viognier? Oh yeah, absolutely. It's got that sort of that like slick, almost creamy, but also like almost oily texture to it. A beautiful. And speaking of slick, have a seat, my girl. So let me introduce my guest, Tonya Pitts, award-winning sommelier. Those of you who are Bay Area or have dined in the Bay Area, you remember Tanya's home-based restaurant that was a very much a specialist of iconic American wines. We're going to stop. We're going to hold for a minute on the Veritas Viognier. Just welcome, first of all.
Thank you.
And
Thank you for
we
that.
just finished tasting the Herman J. Weimer. So let's toast to
Cheers.
our first opportunity to be together in a long time.
Oh, and I'm going to back up for one moment.
Please.
My gosh. So, when Andrea and I were talking through everything, one of the first things I told Andrea, I said, one of my fondest memories for New York and the East Coast was when I was working for Loretta Keller at BZ Restaurant, which was actually my first gig. I had a wonderful opportunity to try wines from the East Coast. This was probably 1993.
When she was 11 years old.
Yeah.
Just kidding. That's awesome.
Mind blown.
Yeah.
To have Cabernet Franc from the North and South Forks and to have wine from Herman J. Weimer and from Dr. Constantine Frank, and just a whole new world opened up for me. There was this really wonderful woman, Nurit Rutowski, who had a really wonderful book called Discoveries in Wine. And she would go all around the country and all around the world, bringing in these little gems and little jewels. And so here's to the East Coast, the Finger Lakes, and New York. And who would have thunk it?
Yeah. Although Dr. Constantine Frank, to your point, he would have thunk it, right? Because he came from the Caucasus, from what was, I think, Georgia at the time. And everyone said he was crazy to try to plant vinifera grapes, which are the European species, that far north. And he said, I'm from Georgia. It's really cold there too. We got this. And he started with something like, I think, Chardonnay and Pinot Noir, and eventually expanded to something like 60 varieties of vinifera, and changed the whole East Coast approach.
And his granddaughter is carrying on the legacy.
Yes, absolutely. So good to have you here. We are just jumping into the Virginia Viognier from Veritas. And I mentioned to the group that it's a frequent winner of the Governor's Cup, which is an annual competition that they have in Virginia for Virginia wines. The winners, and this Viognier has been a winner multiple times, but the winners are always really diverse, right? You might end up with a hybrid. You might end up with a Norton. You might end up with a Nebbiolo and anything in between. But this is Emily Hodson, who is the winemaker at Veritas. Her family started that property. It's a little bit of a pinch me kind of destination because they have farmhouse restaurant, lots of beautiful places you can stay. Have you been?
I have not yet, but I will tell you when people ask me about Virginia, the first thing I tell them is when you think of elevation and you think of California, Washington, it's the same in Virginia. The higher up you go, the harder everything has to struggle, the more flavorful everything is, the more extreme um, the growing conditions are as well. We have this plethora and this treasure here in our own backyard or backyards.
Yes, our
So to speak.
big
Big
backyard.
backyard. Yeah.
But how lucky we are,
Oh,
right?
we're so lucky, so
And
blessed.
and it's so they do some really cool things there with food and wine pairing. You can stay. They have horseback riding, and it's not very far from DC. So like I think it should be a bucket list, and then you're just right in the Shenandoah River Valley, and you just got that whole. You can go fishing,
The Blue Mountains.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
You can go hiking.
Yeah.
You can go camping.
And you can go see, Thomas Jefferson's
Oh,
residence
wow.
and just the
That's a whole
history.
nother story.
Yes. Yeah. I mentioned that, he tried so hard
Yeah.
to have success with vinifera vines in Virginia and that he would be so excited about wine there now if he could come back.
Well, there's so much history, not just there in Virginia, but in Washington, and how Bordeaux in France, um, the wines came to America and were used for trading. It's amazing. There is so much history.
Speaking of culinary traditions, though, in Virginia and Thomas Jefferson, a little known fact is that he brought mac and cheese back from Europe, from his Europe travails. So I would recommend that you try the mac and cheese with the Viognier because I think here we're basically going richness with richness, weight with weight, and Virginia Thomas Jefferson with Virginia Thomas Jefferson culinary because it was quite a sensation. I think ice cream and baked Alaska were also culinary traditions that he kind of figured out from his travels in Europe. And I'll also say that the rice that the southeast part of the United States, the Carolinas and that area in Virginia, that they're so famous for. We've got this beautiful red rice that you should try with this wine as well. I read Thomas Jefferson and Wine, which is about an 18-hour read, and I've learned as part of it that he went on, took a horse and buggy, got to the Dolomites, and the horse and buggy couldn't make it over the mountain, so he went to horseback, got over into Piedmont, fell in love with Nebbiolo, which is the famous grape of the Italian Piedmont region, and then stole rice from the Po River Valley to bring back to the United States, which was a crime punishable by death at the time. So he was really serious about his food and wine and bringing the best possible, not just grape varieties, but also rice back.
I bet he threw fantastic dinner parties.
Yes, it's very famous for those dinner parties for sure. We had a little video from Emily talking about the importance of how the Judgment of Paris tasting kind of created something in this country that we didn't have, which was a wine culture.
I mean, it definitely opened the floodgates sort of for a wine culture in America. And I'm very thankful for that. It's probably what I see happening at Veritas that just really does brand Virginia wine, because that experience of just sitting out on the deck connecting, and that's my favorite part is, and sometimes I'm actually jealous because I'm at work, and I see they're having such a lovely time on a Tuesday at 3 o'clock, and I'm like, wow, these people have got this right.
Right? Okay, speaking of lovely time on a Wednesday, it's good to be us. Yay. So I hope you'll give that whole region a look. The new generation of wine drinker is excited about it because it's like they're excited that they haven't heard of it as opposed to that, being intimidated by that. It's like, oh, let me see. And when you think about it, how natural wines and orange wines and things like that have taken off. And you and I both remember when Albarino wasn't something that people knew about. our New Zealand Sauvignon Blanc. So it's just mo better.
Well, and now you can find Albarino grown here
Yep.
and Verdejo
Yep.
grown here as well.
Yep.
So
So it's just horizons expanded, and that's the beauty, I think, of the American wine landscape, because we don't have the appellation rules of Europe, and so we can kind of do what we want, and being Americans, that's what we do.
we can play around and we can experiment, and just like they did
Yeah.
in the original origin.
Yeah.
Does this work here?
Yes.
Will it grow here? Will it thrive here? Can we thrive here? And if it does, then we go for it and we do it.
Yeah, I love it.
Yeah.
So speaking of that, we're going to move on to wine number 3, and this is its own Cinderella story, or I might say its own like Mount Crushmore story, because part of my documentary is anointing the Mount Crushmore of American wine, and pretty much every state that is making interesting wine has one. And a lot of them are interconnected, because these people who are visionaries and breaking new ground were very often working with each other and taking encouragement and being like, "Hey, what do you think? What do you got going on?" And so, but this is a cool story, like what we started with, which is the French-American friendship, in the sense that Oregon got its origins with Pinot Noir. Well, you tell who started it.
Well,
Papa Pinot.
Papa Pinot was actually, I like to think, um, started by kind of the first families that came to Oregon and really put down roots. Some of those families were
David Lett, and now
David
his
Lett
son,
and his
Jason.
son Jason Lett,
Yep.
had been farming in Oregon since the 1940s, early 50s, and he brought in all these different varietals, not just Chardonnay and Pinot Noir. He brought in Chassalas, he brought in Malbec, he brought in Cab Franc, a lot of different varietals to figure out what would actually work. And the same with Chardonnay and Pinot Noir. It didn't all work in all places and designations. Some things thrive better than others in certain soil contents. So, but now his son taken up um, has taken up the flagpole, and it's fantastic, because now we have Kinsey
Yeah.
that are there,
The
Argyle,
Ponzi,
the Ponzis
Mhm.
that have been there forever as well. The sisters, the ladies, I like to call them. There's a large population of female winemakers that are in Oregon as well. Shout out to the ladies.
Shout out to the ladies.
That make fantastic wines.
So this is Domaine Drouhin, Oregon. We'll take a look at the label real quick. This is their Lorraine, which is their most famous bottling, their highest end bottling. I just want you to notice underneath Pinot Noir, it has the appellation or the sub-district of the Willamette Valley called the Dundee Hills. They're right in the heart of that. It mentions, custom oak barrels from Burgundy. So this is a family, the Domaine Drouhin, Oregon, is by the Drouhin family. The Drouhin family, originally from the Burgundy region of France.
Yes.
And this winery got started because although David Lett and Dick Ponzi and some of the others, the Sokol Blossers, had been there doing Pinot Noir much earlier, it caught the attention of Robert Drouhin, who said, "I just had Pinot Noir from Oregon and I was impressed." Once you had the French sort of endorsement of the region, it really meant a lot.
Well, it's kind of the stamp of approval. Dundee Hills, it's kind of it's a bowl that sits in the middle of the district, and there's elevation, and within the elevation there are these different types of soil sets, and I sometimes like to think of some of them as layer cake.
Totally.
Yes, I do. To meet the daughter, Veronique, who runs the domain, it's just, it's fantastic.
Actually, I'm glad you mentioned Veronique because we have a lovely little video for her. It's the Drouin video, talking about the origin of the estate.
And I spoke to my father and I said, I would love to go to, back then we were calling the New World. And he was a very good friend to Robert Mondavi, who would come to Burgundy a lot. So I said, do you think I could work with Robert? So I knew him, loved his wine, loved the man. He was such an inspiration and a good friend of Robert, my father, so the two Bob. And so my father said, oh, I'm sure he will take you, but I think you should go to Oregon. And so I looked at my father and I said, where is it? Why would I go to Oregon? And he said that he had been traveling to sell his wines from Burgundy here because there's a lot of people who love wine. And he said, but while I was there, I was presented some Pinot Noir. I had no idea they were growing Pinot Noir there. And he said, I was impressed. So he said, maybe it's interesting that you go there. Sure. So we asked our distributor if one of their suppliers would take a young French girl from Burgundy. I didn't think they would say yes. Didn't know me. I was young, no experience. And they all said yes.
Robert Drouin invested in Oregon. He brought his daughter here to train with people like David Lett, with David Adelsheim, with Dick Ponzi, and they all, nurtured her.
So I came here with my suitcase for Harvest 1986, and I spent 1 month with each of them. And obviously David Lett, Papa Pinot, can see almost his house from here. It was just unbelievable to be spending time with them.
So you can see that spirit of nurturing and almost going the other direction. One quick segue and we'll jump to the next wine, but her grandfather, Maurice Drouin, was an aide de camp to MacArthur in World War II and a translator. And they have a picture of him, his military photograph in the winery. So talk about a connection to America. And I said to her, I don't think we would have a country without the French. And she said, well, I might be speaking German if it weren't for the Americans. And so
Yeah.
like that heartfelt connection is just and I had said to people earlier, I guess I lost it, but I had my French flag in addition to my American flag because yesterday was Bastille Day.
Yes.
And we're so joined at the heart that that's important, I think, for us to recognize.
Heart and hip.
Yes, exactly, exactly. So that it was just absolutely delicious. I'm curious if anybody had any pairings. I thought, to me, the macaroni and cheese is the win with that particular one. But and then of course I did the truffle popcorn because anytime you bring truffles into Pinot Noir mode, you're good. So let's jump into. We're going to taste a little bit out of order. That's why we have numbers, circle numbers, and that's why we have numbers on our sheet. I'm going to just jump over wine 4. We're going to come back to it just for stylistic reasons, and we're going to stay in the Pacific Northwest and head over to Walla Walla, in this case, Washington. I think the AVA, the viticultural area, does dump over into Oregon a bit.
It does.
This part is the Washington side, and we have Bledsoe Family Winery. I know we're all in the other football mode right now, but Bledsoe is the NFL Bledsoe, and when he retired from the NFL, had already fallen in love with wine and decided to start this family estate. Josh McDaniels became really, really enamored with wine and wine growing, and they're collaborators on this. But we give so much attention to Bordeaux Cabernet Sauvignon, to California Cabernet Sauvignon, and rightly so. But Washington really has some beautiful cab, and their style is its own thing. What do you think?
Cabernet from Walla Walla has this, there's fruit, but there's tannin structure, and you can smell it and you can feel it. But there's this voluptuousness, and you can smell that I'm going to like you, but there's going to be some tension there. We're not going to fight, but there's going to be a little tussle.
We're going to challenge one another?
Just a little bit.
And I think also that gorgeous acidity that is almost a little bit more European acidity. For me, a little bit crunchier and crisper.
It's mouthwatering.
Yeah.
It's inviting for you to take another sip.
Yes.
It really, really is.
Yeah.
It's actually a mixture of more red and kind of what
Yeah.
I like to call berry, more kind of
Yeah,
blueberry,
wild berries.
wild berry
Yeah, totally agree with you.
fruit.
So we have a little quick video with Josh McDaniels talking about the Walla Walla region. What's Bledsoe?
I tell everybody when I'm traveling anywhere and I'm thinking about home, I think about what that looks like. It's like the Blue Mountains and then the kind of the wheat fields rolling into some of the forest. And so to me, like that is a very beautiful, very Walla Walla Valley morning.
What makes it great for wine?
You know, south facing slopes, we get heat up here, but we also get a lot of cold air that rushes down the mountains, cools the vineyards down, so we get natural acid retained in the wines. So we get, you know, kind of the best of both worlds, which a lot of people talk about in Washington, where we get ripe fruit and ripe flavors coming out of the wines, but we also get, you know, that old world structure. So we get a lot of tannin up here, but we also get a lot of acidity, which is, you know, fantastic, you know, combination of best things that I like in wines.
I love that he said that,
Right?
because one of the things that we talked about, because I said to you, when I think about Washington, I think about the old world and I think about Italy.
I think the thing that's exciting too about these wines is that as much as they've been doing it as long as Oregon has, pretty much, which in a commercial fashion is the late '60s commercially. Same thing with Washington. It's still a sleeper in terms of what it delivers for the price.
It's a bargain. I mean, for this wine, $52 for what this is. This is more a traditional style um Cabernet.
Yeah.
And you know, if
Classical.
oh my
Yeah.
gosh, if you like Cabernet from Groves,
Yeah.
you would love this. This is
With 82% Cab with some Petit Verdot, Malbec, and Merlot, I would never have guessed 78% New French Oak because it really is restrained and
Handle.
subtle. Yeah. So Josh, well done. Drew Bledsoe, well done.
you can drink this now.
Yeah.
Or if you want to let it sit and settle and kind of stretch its legs and relax in your cellar, you can do that. And the thing that's always amazed me when you go through Washington, you either have these kind of really sandy white soils that are really like sand, very fine sand,
Yeah.
or you have these really fine pebbles throughout that are mountainous.
Wow.
It's wild.
That's
Yeah.
Well,
just the wine is just, which is why we have such delicious wine.
yeah, and they say, I mean, I don't know a lot about it, but like geologically, there was the Missoula floods from Montana. Like this is big glacier that melted when the glaciers
And
were melting and
pushed everything up.
water all the way from across that way. So a huge amount of upheaval that created a lot of soil diversity. Delicious wine. Wow, super excited about this. Now we're going to go backwards not in time, but in number. We're going to go to wine number 4. I believe I have a Texan or two in the crowd. A winemaker over here. We got some big ones. Yes.
All right.
All right. The Lone Star State. I wasn't born there, but I went to college there and spent some of my childhood there. I mentioned Denison before, and the research done by, and I can't think of the guy's name. Thank you, T.V. Munson, who did the rootstock research that got us onto phylloxera-resistant roots. Whole book on it that was a Bible for the rest of the globe. But this is, and this was one of our Route Sipty-Sip, Route 66 states, because the route actually traverses the Texas High Plains area. And so it's that part that you go through where most of the grapes are grown. However, we've got the best of both, just like a lot of regions where there's a wonderful ecosystem of wine country tourism in the hill country area, which is kind of equidistant or very, very close to both San Antonio and Austin. And a wonderful place to be. So this winery is called Bending Branch, and they're in the Texas Hill Country. These grapes, however, for the Tempranillo, and like Virginia, Texas is growing a lot of different grapes, come from the Texas High Plains, the Newsom Vineyards, which is one of the most established, widely sourced vineyards, What's unique about this wine, well, many things, but one of them is that Dr. Bob Young started experimenting with Texas terroir taken to an extreme. He's originally from Kentucky, moved to Texas. He began experimenting with Texas oak. So if we're going to take Texas terroir seriously, why not the oak? We have a quick little video from Dr. Bob so you can see how he got this inspiration to go.
I mean, to me, the most important factor outside of the grapes for red wines is oak. I mean, you look at all the barrels around here, right? All these red wines have oak, and why aren't we using Texas oak? But we have our own oak here. We have our own unique terroir because oak responds to terroir just like grapes do, right? And so I was thinking, the French did this. They would make their wine from local grapes and they would harvest wood from their local forest, and it was all integrated. We had it logged and cut into staves and aged for 2 years in East Texas, aged for a year here, and then I contacted a cooperage. And we had what's called oak chains made that you put inside the bunghole of a barrel, and you can get the effect of 50% of a new white oak barrel by doing that. And then we aged 3 wines with it, and they're spectacular. And people are going crazy over it here.
It's got a Texas-sized personality, right? They say everything's big in Texas. That's true. And the personality of this wine is just screaming out at you.
Yeah, it's a robust style Tempranillo. I like to think of Tempranillo as having many different faces. There are many different hues and colors, many different flavor profiles, and there are these layers of color. That's Tempranillo.
So speaking of that Texas oak, there's a real like sweet aromatics to it that reminds me of other expressions of American oak.
The spice that's coming from the barrel.
Yeah.
You took a little bit of cardamom and you took a little bit of allspice, nutmeg.
Ooh. Totally.
Some toffee.
Toffee kind of character that I think of Tempranillo aged in American oak from Spain, where you get that burnt sugar type of quality. How many people have had Tempranillo aged in American oak one way or another? Maybe not the Texas ones, but that's pretty classic in the Rioja region of Spain. So it made sense. So they're definitely not going to be getting any Texas oak barrels anytime soon because he's probably going to get them all. So this is their reserve Tempranillo. And look at the elevation on those vineyards. And so when they say Texas High Plains, they mean it. And he's doing the Texas white oak aging, as you can see. But that whole berry maceration is one thing they're doing to help retain the freshness.
This is just fresh, crisp. What I like to call it's juicy.
Yeah. And then you had it with this slider, which I took the opportunity while you were initially talking about it.
Oh, yeah.
That is, I know it's like, okay, a Texas slider with a Texas wine, but it's so good.
Yep.
And that whole, if they grew up together, they go together, like maybe so.
The things to pay attention to from Texas besides Tempranillo.
Oh, yeah, thank you.
Rhone varietals. So, Syrah, Marsanne, Roussanne, Grenache Blanc, Grenache Gris, Grenache Rouge. They're absolutely stunning. The rosés. There's even really beautiful sparkling coming out of Texas as well.
So let's get to wine number 6. This is, some people think of it as America's grapes, and we do because we have such great old vines, old vineyards of Zinfandel. And this is Brown Estate. Right around the corner, Brown downtown is one of the best places to taste wine in Napa Valley. I really believe that. It's just such a great vibe. I think we maybe have a few of the folks from the Brown. Welcome. Thank you for coming. All right, we got the back row. You guys, they just got off work probably or something. But anyway, the Brown family, I think it's the only or one of only 2 estate Black-owned wineries in Napa. Am I right about that? I think it may be the only
they're
estate.
the only.
The only one. Okay. They started planting Zinfandel on the estate. The property is stunning what they've done with it to, because it's a historic property. But Mike Gergich, who made the Paris tasting winning Chateau Montelena Chardonnay, of course, came from Croatia. and was a huge Zinfandel advocate, and began to collaborate with them very early. And I, they have so many wonderful stories about Mike and Evo coming out and walking the vines with them and getting them going.
Some of, I think, the most forgotten about grape varietals that are grown in Napa and higher elevation are Zinfandel
Right.
and Syrah.
Oh, yeah.
Because they thrive here.
Carol Meredith,
Mm.
UC Davis PhD, she sequenced the DNA of the Zinfandel grape to determine its origins as Croatian. Because and one of my poll questions that I had for you was, what was it? What is it really? It's Zerlianats Castellanski, and I know I'm saying that very not right, but we thought it was Primitivo, we thought it was Darif, lots of different things. She finally did the science to figure that out. So that connection there is beautiful. Let's take a look at the label of this wine. This is the Rosemary's Block Zinfandel. So it's an estate Zinfandel from their property out there. When you smell it and taste it, you can see that it is not a big sumo wrestler of a Zin. It is just Zinfandel that's like crooning rather than, hollering. It's gorgeous.
There are different styles of Zinfandel that marry it more towards claret, and this is one of those. As you get into more old vine, because this is harboring now towards old vine more than not, because these vines are what? Old vine now is over 25 years old.
Zinfandel is unique in it. It's able to last for a long time. A lot of vines, they succumb to diseases or other issues and have to be replanted quicker, at least in our part of the world. Not so much maybe in other places, but this is so exciting. And I just tasted it with the rice. Oh my gosh.
Oh, yeah. There's a little spike that's there.
It's absolutely delicious. But to me, that's a great food wine, period. Got great acid, and just juicy red berries, lots of great spice. It's kind of dancing.
And it brings out the kind of savory element and the sage leaf that comes through. Again, what do you want? I want another sip.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Yeah. I didn't taste it yet with the mac and cheese, but I'm thinking that's probably a huge win as well. Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
and this will be, lighter and creamier on the palate.
Right.
And it'll cause the wine to be much creamier in the middle of the palate too. And the fruit will be much more sumptuous
Yeah.
as well.
It's fun. I like that you're talking about it in textural terms. And the truth of the matter is, and Chef would say this, I'm sure too, like when it comes to wine or food, texture is almost as important, if not as, and sometimes more, depending what it is.
It adds to everything.
I mean, because like we have the ability. It's not just that we've got taste buds. We've got the sense of touch, and that's why the variation here is so cool. That electricity, the acid in the Riesling, and then the weight and kind of silky like oiliness of the Viognier, and then everything in between. And now we're back here to this thing that's got. It's almost like a hot rod. So, any winning pairings? Ooh, I love that. Our take on Virginia ham with a little jalapeno on a biscuit, because of course we're talking about Southern style food. With, you said, the Washington Cabernet Sauvignon, so the Bledsoe family. Wow, that is really cool.
I'm diving in.
You're responsible. Wow, the jalapeno thing is what takes it.
But you know what though?
Ooh.
The butter on the biscuit makes the jalapeno sweet.
Yeah. Well, we like that.
We like that.
Yes, we do. Any other big insights before we wrap it? Well, I want to say, Tonya,
Yes.
thank you so much.
Oh, thank you.
My goodness. Where should we look for you? What are you reviewing for the Wine Enthusiast?
Northern California.
Well,
So,
there's nothing to talk about
oh
there.
my God, there's
Gosh,
lots.
you're so busy.
Lots.
Wow.
So, Mendocino, Anderson Valley, Clarksburg, Lodi, Lake County, Contra Costa County,
I got to talk to you about wine.
Skull, Winters, um, California AVA,
Wow. Well, that's a lot.
everywhere,
That's a lot.
everywhere that
Is
pretty
in
much.
Napa and Sonoma,
Mm-hmm.
which is so
Yeah.
cool. All right, so
Yeah.
that's super
Yeah.
exciting. So look for her
Mendocino
stuff.
Ridge,
Really great. The
everywhere.
really cool things.
Yeah.
Wow.
And then I have my own consulting company too. So
Excellent.
yeah.
And I'm just going to lobby for both of us because we were talking about the Governor's Cup, and we would both like to be invited to judge it. Okay. So because we think that would be really fun. I want to thank everybody for coming tonight, the in-person audience as well as our
Thank you.
live viewing audience. And we have some rah hands in the back. Appreciate that. And I want to mention also something. I appreciate everybody's support here. This is a collaboration with Copia, the CIA at Copia. What we really want to be able to do is do a great program of things that we like to do and make it really educational and collaborative and be able to talk about lots of things. So it's a real joy to be able to work with this team here, and especially the service team. They're fantastic. But this is an important time that I would love to get your support. If you happen to fly Delta Airlines, which has been a partner of mine for a long time, the first 3 episodes of my documentary series, The Swirled Cup, are on the planes right now. And so if you search them up, you'll see The Sipping Point, which talks about how the Judgment of Paris tasting was a tipping point for the world of wine. You'll see the Mount Crushmore of American wine is episode 2, and you can't tell on that picture, it's Robert Mondavi, Andre Chelichev, Stephen Spurrier, and Patricia Gallagher, whose idea of tasting was. And then you'll see What? Which is our episode defining terroir and how people can think about it as their cultural expression. So food, music, art, architecture, but of course wine. So I'd love you to search up those episodes and take a look at them. And I'll give you just a little quick picture of what that looks like. We'll show the Stephen video.
We've held lots of tastings, but we've never held a tasting of California wine. And the purpose is to draw attention to the quality of wine coming out of California. But I said, we need a peg to hang it on. And she said, I've got the exact peg that next year, 1976, is the bicentennial of the War of American Independence. And I said, well, Patricia, we British don't celebrate that because we lost the colonies, but I'll go along with it. It was too much of a risk to me to have these wines damned with faint praise. And so I told Patricia, I said, I'm going to choose the 4 best white Burgundies from the shop and the 4 best red Bordeaux and put them in blind. And she said, you can't do that because the judges are coming just to taste California wine. I said, I'll explain it to them on the day. And if they don't agree, we won't do it. So, of course, all the judges turn up. And I said, most of you are not accustomed to these wines. Therefore, I thought it would be more interesting to compare them blind to the top wines of Burgundy and Bordeaux. Do you have any problem with that? Bien sûr, Mrs. Spurrier, pas de problème. And the rest is history.
Thank you so much for inviting me and having me
Thank you.
today. And I will come back anytime
We will have you back
and,
often.
and talk about all things wine.
All things wine.
Mhm.
Excuse me. I got really choked up on that one. It was really fun to interview Stephen. That was obviously before he passed away. And I never knew that, sorry, I never knew that it was not a competition. I thought it was a competition between France and California. The French wines only got thrown in at the last minute so that people who were tasting them, which were the top palates of France, would not think there was nothing of quality in there. And that's really what made that tasting matter. It's what brought Robert and Veronique Drouin to Oregon. And it's that extra juice that went in behind the American grit and confidence and fearlessness to take it to where it's gotten to today.
Well, that was the page turner.
Exactly.
Yeah.
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 So everyone, it's not over because we have this whole year of America 250, and then we've got the next many decades and centuries to keep writing that story. But let's take a toast to our birthday because it's a very special occasion. and we're growing together. Cheers.
Cheers.